In this video, we're going to start off with part 1 in activity 3.1.5 called Variables and Functions. And this video series is going to be utilizing the VEX Cortex and Robot C to do the programming methods you see in the video. If you're looking for VEX V5 resources, please check out other videos on my YouTube page for help with the V5 and VEX Code system. So with this, we're going to go ahead to get started. We want to make sure our platform, when we click on robot, go down to platform type, make sure you do have the VEX 2.0 Cortex and natural language PLTW options selected. And then that way we can find under file, we're going to choose the open sample program. And within the VEX 2 folder, we can find the PLTW folder and open up our PLTW template. With this, to make sure we don't overwrite our template, we're going to make some setting changes. We'll go to motor and sensor setup. We'll select our configuration to be the PoE sim testbed. Click OK. And then we're going to go ahead and add a title in here, which will be activity 3.1.5 variables and functions. And this will be part 1. And then you can add in some of the information. So I'll put my name in there, the date, as well as what section, so which would be like a class section or anything like that. And then we can go ahead and go to File, Save As. I'm going to go ahead and on my desktop I've got a folder here that I can create. For activity 3.1.5. And then inside of that folder I usually like to create this kind of naming convention. So activity 3.1.5 part 1 and hit save. Alright, so in this section for part 1, they want us to use a variable to loop a program a certain number of times. So within part 1, they actually give us, as we take a look at part 1, they give us a section of code that has already been written, and they want us to go ahead and copy it and paste that in the curly braces, document what the pseudo code would be, and put in our line-by-line comments. So within the task main, I can paste this in. I'm going to get rid of the white space between the last brace in the program that was given and then the program ends of the task main. And here we can kind of take a look. So before we get going, let's kind of look at this program. Task description, we're using a variable to loop a program. We just use n times is what they kind of have there. So pseudo code, as we start looking, we're going to, when you see int motor count, so we're going to initialize the variable called, and here in parentheses we can put motor count. Okay, we're going to set motor count to 0 as a start. So maybe we need to go ahead and say set the initial value of motor count to 0. And then we're going to set up a while loop. So while motor count is less than 3, then we want to start the motor. We'll say start the right motor at 3/4 speed going forward. Wait for 2 seconds. Stop the right motor and wait for 2 seconds. And then what we're going to do is once this runs those commands, we're going to add +1 to the assignment. And then we'll say repeat until variable motor count reaches 3. So that's kind of what's going on here. In the pseudocode, I'm going to copy this here. And we're going to go ahead and start putting in our comments. Alright, let me go ahead and bring this down a little bit. So here's what we're going to end up doing is let's go ahead and compile the program and make sure we got everything set up correctly. Let's download the robot. When we set up these variables, we're going to also take a look at our debugger window. So I'm going to go up to Robot, Debugger Windows, and let's go ahead and turn on our local variables, and let's turn on our global variables. So here's our global variable, actually the one that we want. So I can go ahead and hide that local variable actually. So global variables, motor count shows up, and here's what's going to happen. Let's go ahead and hit start. So it's going to go through and run that motor at 2-second intervals, start and stop. And then what it did is once it runs, so it runs the motor for 2 seconds, stops it for 2 seconds. Once it gets down to this line, it adds +1 to the variable, and you could see the motor count counting up. So I want you to watch that one more time. Hit start. Starts at 0 up here at the top. While the motor counts less than 3, it repeats whatever's in the while loop until once it reads once it hits 3, then it stops the program. So it only runs that program 3 times. So now let's take a look to see what they want us to do. Now they want us to create a program that will run a motor back and forth 20 times, half a second each way. Test the program until we get the expected behavior, and they want us to comment that, and we want us to make sure that we save it because we're going to reuse it in activity 316. So again, 20 back and forth 20 times, half a second each way. So let me go ahead and close our program. Let me see if Robot C will respond here. There we go. So I'll close the program debug window. Sometimes Robot C has a little bit of trouble. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to set our, we can use our motor count variable. We'll still set it at 0. We want it to go for 20 times. So while motor count is less than 20, and we want to go ahead and start our motor, but instead we want to do a half a second each way. So we'll go ahead and do 0.5 and 0.5 for the wait statements, which we can go ahead and change also in our comments as well as in our pseudocode. So which can occur. So while motor counts less than 20, and once it reaches 20, then it will stop. So again, 20 times, a half a second each way. Instead of the stop motor, we want to go ahead and actually change this over. So let me go ahead and say, instead of stop the motor, we're going to start the right motor at 3/4 speed, going in reverse, which means, let me grab this line on our pseudocode, copy, instead of stopping it, and then we need to make some changes to our command. So start motor, right motor, comma, -95. So now compile, Download the robot, and then we'll watch our right motor and see how it behaves. So I'll hit start. So once the variable reaches 20, it stops the program. So we've looped this program only a certain number of times, so for us to go ahead and stop. So this would go through and finish out activity 315, variables and functions, part 1, and check out the next video for part 2 and to look to see how we can remember some certain values utilizing variables.